I am done with Modern Warfare 2022. But before I get into why, there's something that you need to understand. I am not the type of Call of Duty player to do nothing but complain about the new game every single year. Sure, I've always got feedback, but for the most part, I'll happily play the new Call of Duty pretty much all throughout its year-long lifespan. And I even go as far as to make ridiculously long and thought-out video essays going over every single aspect of the game at the end of its year. I'll leave a link to that playlist in a pinned comment down below, by the way. But what I'm trying to say is, I'm not normally one to quit on Call of Duty. And if I were, I wouldn't be one to make a big dramatic video about it. And yet, here we are. For the past 3 or 4 years, I've been able to enjoy Call of Duty in spite of its flaws. Things like a generally bad live service model, an overemphasis on uninspired cosmetics, and recycling the same remakes of weapons and maps over and over again. Even with all those things, I've been able to enjoy myself while playing, and for me, that's the bottom line. Unfortunately, I can't say the same for Modern Warfare 2022. I simply do not have fun when playing this game. Now, I'm guessing you've already seen a handful of videos like this one, and you've already heard all of the popular complaints that surround the game. As usual, it seems like no one is happy with this year's Call of Duty release. And like I said, I'm usually never the guy who's talking about how dead Call of Duty is. But since I am this time around, I wanted to make a video going over why. MW22 had the biggest launch in Call of Duty history, with a new version of the Warzone Battle Royale, a new extraction mode DMZ, and of course a traditional multiplayer mode. But as of recording this video, interest in the game is tanking by pretty much every metric we have access to. So why are so many people quitting the game? I think the biggest reason is one you've probably heard before: insufficient post-launch content. The game came out, there was a lot of buzz, but the content offering wasn't enough to keep people playing long term. Now, there is something important to note here. Infinity Ward does add things to the game pretty regularly throughout all of the game's different modes. We have Warzone, which has gotten a few new modes and an all-new small-scale map. We have DMZ, which I personally haven't really been keeping up with, but I know they've added new locations and new challenges to that mode. We have a new co-op narrative mode with the raids, which we've seen 2 of. We have some wildcard stuff like the World Cup Rocket League mode. And then, of course, we have the core multiplayer, which has gotten some new modes, and let me check my notes here. 1 new original 6v6 map, and we've gotten new weapons which apply to all modes. So when you stack all that together, it actually seems like there's plenty of new stuff that's been added to the game, and it's true. But because all of the new content is being fragmented out between all these different modes they're trying to support, no one mode is actually getting an abundance of content. So instead of the problem being lack of content, like most people would call it, I feel like it's really more of a lack of focus. Infinity Ward is putting new stuff into the game, just not where it matters. We don't know the player counts for all of the different modes, but I'd guess that Warzone probably has the highest amount of players since it's free to play and a battle royale, and the second most played mode would be core multiplayer, since that's the mode that Call of Duty was built on. For me personally, since I really only care about multiplayer, I would trade both of the raids plus the new Warzone map in exchange for a single new 6v6 map in an instant, because that's how starved for content the 6v6 community is. Obviously, players who are interested in other parts of the game probably wouldn't make this trade, but that's just the nature of this bad situation that Infinity Ward has gotten themselves into, trying to turn this game into more of a platform than a traditional Call of Duty game, when they clearly did not have the resources or the know-how to support something so ambitious. Which feels crazy to say, because last time I checked, Call of Duty has like 10 studios working on it at any given time, and yet they still can't keep their player base as happy as Epic Games does with Fortnite, for example, or Respawn with Apex Legends. I think if they were just to focus a little bit more on what players actually want from the game and create content based around that specifically, then less people would be leaving the game. And once there was a solid foundation of content underneath the game, then you could start to branch out into more experimental stuff like raids and Rocket League and all that. It just feels weird getting a second raid added into the game when Warzone and 6v6, which like I said are the most popular modes, are so starved for content. So for most people, I think the biggest killer has been the lack of focus. The game offers everything and nothing. Warzone players aren't happy, 6v6 players aren't happy, DMZ players aren't happy, if there even is a DMZ community at this point. And that's because Infinity Ward has opted to support a plethora of modes just a little bit instead of supporting one or two modes a lot. This is definitely something that's bothered me, but it doesn't bother me as much as the next thing that I want to talk about. For me personally, this is the main reason why I'm done with MW22. This game is so boring in a handful of different ways. So let's unpack that statement a little bit. Starting with the gameplay design. Call of Duty made a name for itself by being a fast-paced, casual shooter. And for most of its existence, that's exactly what it's been. But starting with Modern Warfare 2019, Infinity Ward introduced a new style of gameplay, where the maps were bigger and more complex, and the movement was slower and more punishing. While I'm sure some players took to this new style of gameplay, the majority did not. But the game, in a way, was saved by the introduction of Warzone and a 24/7 multiplayer playlist, which consisted of the only two maps in the game that were small enough to be played at a fast pace: Shipment and Shoot House. Also, I tend to think that another thing that saved the game were the broken movement techniques discovered by players, which introduced some speed into the game, as well as a small skill gap. Things like slide canceling and bunny hopping. Leading up to Modern Warfare 2022, I was praying that Infinity Ward had learned their lesson. People come to Call of Duty for speed and fluidity, not for realism. But maybe I'm wrong, because what Infinity Ward created with Modern Warfare 2022 is a true continuation of what they did with the first one. A sequel to Modern Warfare 2019 in almost every way. Maps are back to being massive, to the point where sometimes you can feel a little lost as to where you should even go if you want to get a piece of the action. Movement is slow, and all of the movement tech has been patched out of the game. And I mean all. You can't bunny hop or slide cancel. Jump shotting is now not as viable since ADS speed, while airborne has been slowed down, and even sliding has been nerfed into the ground, like just a normal straight up slide. It's painfully slow and takes your gun away from you for way too long. When I first started playing this game, I had to unbind my slide button because I was so used to pressing it and it was just constantly getting me killed. Look, I could rant for an hour about how brutally boring the movement is in this game, but for now I'll just leave it at this. This movement is an insult. So, the maps are big and the movement is restrictive. I don't think that this is something that most of the player base enjoys, but like I said before, maybe I'm wrong. With how hard Infinity Ward doubled down on this style of gameplay, you would think that they know something that I don't. But from where I'm standing, the game is boring to play and to watch. And just like we saw in 2019, without a 24/7 Shipment or Shoot House playlist, it's borderline unplayable because of how dreadfully uneventful a match of multiplayer can be. So this gameplay design makes the game a snooze fest. But you want to know what else makes the game boring? The incessant use of remakes. Most of the post-launch content that's come to the multiplayer has been a remake, like Shipment or Shoot House or Dome, or game modes that we've seen before, like One in the Chamber, and to some degree I think you can count weapons too, since most weapons in the game resemble weapons from the last one. For example, every year a couple seasons into the game, they always add a crossbow. Like, I guess it's kinda cool, but I'm at the point where I'm not gonna get excited for the crossbow to be added into the game anymore. We've experienced this over and over again. So it gives the impression that nothing new and exciting is happening in the game. It's just rehashing what we're used to seeing in a Call of Duty. The third way that the game is boring is probably more of just a personal gripe, so let me know if you agree, but I find that the realistic tone that Infinity Ward is going for just falls a little flat. I mean, things like the skins in the shop and battle pass, not really anything to write home about in most cases. Usually it's just some normal looking military dude. Same goes for the maps so far. Not only do they play boring like we talked about, but they're boring to look at as well. Now I know that some people really like the fact that the theme of the game is very grounded in reality. And look, it's not like I'm asking for a Star Wars crossover or anything. I just wish the game was a little less vanilla. This is one of the reasons why I've always preferred Black Ops to Modern Warfare. A Black Ops game has a really unique sense of wonder. You never know what kind of map or mode or skin they're gonna add in next. And I think games like Fortnite and Apex Legends have a similar thing going. With Fortnite, for example, the sky is the limit for what they could be working on next. And it's exciting to feel like anything could happen. Meanwhile, Modern Warfare 2 just seems so constricted by its setting. So in conclusion, MW22 suffers from a major lack of focus and lack of excitement in both gameplay and theme. Not enough content is being made for any of the modes that the game is trying to support, and the content that does get added just reminds you of how boring the game is to play in the first place. That is why I've checked out of Modern Warfare 2022 at this point. Now that's not to say that I will never play the game ever again. In fact, I know I'll have to hop on at the end of the year to do my final review for my CODology series over on my main channel. But for now, I have no desire whatsoever to play this game. With the way that Infinity Ward made it, it feels like they were trying their hardest to get players like me to quit the game. And I have to say, in that regard, they've done an amazing job. It feels weird to not want to play Call of Duty, to be honest. I haven't had this feeling probably since Call of Duty World War II, which seems like forever ago at this point. But I just can't bring myself to play this one. Thank you for watching, and stay gold.